A loved coach and responsible granddad's world falls apart.
I don't know how we went from going to a baseball game to this tragedy.
When he runs to the rescue of a daughter caught up in a crime of passion.
You would have never thought that he would commit this and begin with. That's why I call it a perfect storm.
It was my feeling that it was complete self-defense.
They say a perfect storm is a rare moment when a series of events simultaneously come together to cause great damage, like a hurricane of great force hitting a vulnerable area. They're events that, taken on their own, might not have had the same impact. In Willie Suber's case, the events that led to the hurricane in his life came together suddenly one day in early May 2007 in Salinas County, California. This is a story of a dutiful father protecting a daughter from an impending crime of passion, a protection that took on a life of its own, escalating into a tragic storm for the Suber family. 62-year-old Willie Suber, a well-respected track coach at an exclusive high school in California, led for all to see an exemplary life. A role model coach to his students, he's also, not surprisingly, known as a staunch, perhaps even indulgent family man.
Mr. Suber worked, I believe, for about 40 years with a very prestigious private school in Pebble Beach. He was a teacher of young people. And particularly young boys, high school age boys. So he was used to assuming the role of a mentor.
You're constantly always putting out fires or tending to somebody's problem, and in a 24-hour day boarding school, he's really helping families out, he's helping children out, he's always coming to the aid of people.
My dad started his life with nothing, and he believed in working your way up and working hard, and he didn't care how much money you had. As long as you were honest and a good person, that's all that mattered to him.
He was raised by his stepfather, who was career military in the Army. He never knew his own biological father. He was the oldest of 6 children. He had 5 maternal half-siblings. So Mr. Suber was the man in the family. And he was the one who had to be responsible to take care of everyone, his siblings as well as his mother.
Married for 23 years to Maria, with whom he fell in love at first sight 33 years ago, they share a blended family and had one of their own, Selena.
Our daughter, Selena, they had a very close relationship. She used to call him her big guy.
My baby sister, I'm 9 years older than her. So she's always been the baby. She bonded all of us together, if that makes sense. She was a piece of all of us that brought our family together, and that's how I always saw her.
She was the apple of his eye. She was really spoiled by her father. She could do no wrong.
And in her teenage years, she did no wrong, just a typical rebellious teen. But then at 21, Selena's life takes a sharp turn when she meets a passionate young man.
Selena met Danny maybe about 4 years ago. And they were seeing each other before we even met him. I believe that Danny was troubled, maybe young man. He never knew his father.
Selena lacks direction and is feisty, while Danny, though well-meaning, is hot-tempered. It's a tempestuous mix that ends up consuming a lot of Maria and Willie's attention and concern, especially since by 2005, Selena has a child with Danny.
Willie kind of took him, under his wing and tried to tell him and teach him about, family and responsibility, and now that he was having a child.
I did not really approve of her and Danny's relationship, but my mom and dad would sit me down and tell me, you know what, This is who Selena's chosen. And so we as a family have to try to help them.
We did everything to help Danny. He was in our home all the time. I think at one point we were getting very close. We gave him a car so he could go back and forth to work. We paid for their rent for over a year.
She didn't want us to know he won't take care of the baby, he won't work. So I know that was a source of conflict for them, and it just seemed to be getting worse and worse and worse.
Worse for Daddy's little girl meant struggling with Danny's increasingly violent outbursts and assaults, often occurring in front of the child. It makes Selena run to her parents, especially Willie, for help.
The police have been called a number of times. They both had issues involving domestic violence. Mr. Suber would step up and try to resolve the issues without involving the police any more than they had to. For example, when Danny was on probation, rather than call police, which may violate probation, he did what he could to try and take care of him. Try and get him a job, try to help him solve financial problems, not call the police when there was domestic violence for fear that that would violate the probation.
But the arguments throughout 2006 don't change, and eventually Danny is charged with domestic assault. Still, Willie's optimism in Danny never wavers.
Willie had gotten Danny a job at the school. It was something that he could have insurance, a steady paycheck, a good job. And he didn't want it. He didn't pass the drug test.
These refusals to follow through on the opportunities given him frustrate Selena and deepen the resentment and arguments between the young lovers, eventually forcing a rescuing father to make an unenviable choice in the face of a crime of passion.
Willie and Maria Suber tried and successfully accomplished the goal time after time after time of settling disputes between their daughter and her boyfriend. They didn't anticipate anything different on this day.
A respected member of the community in Pebble Beach and Salinas, California, finds his efforts to save his daughter and grandson from a troubled and abusive love bond will be tested to the limit in the spring of 2007 and shock one of his closest colleagues.
I was a starter for these track meets for years and years, and I would watch this and watch in amazement how Willie handled everybody with this kindness, with this calmness, with this sense of dignity. And I just go, I would never be able to do that. I couldn't be pulled all these different directions, and 70-some kids all at one point or another having personal contact with Willie and still be able to remain, this dignified guy.
It's skills Willie Suber tries to bring to his relationship with Danny Flores, the young man in his daughter Selena's life. He offers Danny money and a job, even a car, all to no avail. Danny just can't get on track, and the fights with Selena intensify. In the winter of 2007, Danny is on probation for domestic abuse when a violent episode brings Willie once again to their door.
I believe it was in March of last year that they had a very big blowout. Willie didn't want to call the police because he was on probation, so we didn't want him to get rearrested and all that. So we had gone over there. Danny's mom had gone over there too, but she stayed in the car. And we were able to, again, calm things down. Selena said that she didn't want anything else to do with him. She made Willie call the police. When the police arrived, they told her, they said, if you continue with a relationship of this nature, he's never seen the outcome to be a positive outcome. It's always been very tragic.
Selena is scared into heeding the advice of police and vows to live on her own with her toddler son.
She had specifically gotten a one-bedroom apartment. She said that would be big enough for me and I don't want to have anything to do with him anymore.
Are you sure you're going to start your life on your own? And she said, absolutely. We found another apartment for her because I told her, this is the last time that we're going to help. If you want to be with him, then you're going to be on your own.
And Selena does begin to manage well enough on her own. She's even obtained a job and is devoted to her young boy. Finally, Willie and Maria have hope things will turn out well. 2 months pass. It's May 5th, 2007. It's a sunny Saturday morning, and the Subers head to a Little League game with a grandchild.
And then after that, we were leaving to go out of town to a craft fair. And we normally carry a gun when we go out of town, especially with the jewelry, and we had money and stuff.
While they were on their way to the show, they received a number of phone calls from Selena. Initially, the phone call was, gee, things are good, I've got this new job, everything's happy.
A few minutes later, she calls again, and this time she's crying, and she's sounding more upset. Well, where are you guys? When are you going to get here?
This is the first time they learn that Danny may be back somehow in Selena's life.
She wanted them to come and pick up the baby because she was having a problem.
They were just about to get off the freeway when the third call came in. At that point, she was desperate and panicky.
I said, we're down the street, we're coming. We barely pulled up in the driveway, and she's running out of the house. She comes around my side, she throws the baby in the car, and she's crying. I said, honey, what is going on? Nothing. You guys, I just want you guys to leave.
Suddenly, things seemed so out of control.
What Willie walked into, though, he had never seen before.
Willie and Maria Suber tried and successfully accomplished the goal time after time after time of settling disputes between their daughter and her boyfriend. They didn't anticipate anything different on this day, but when they got there, Danny was different. We don't know why to this day. Maria described him as having this weird look in his face.
His face was distorted. I've never seen that look on anyone's face. And it was scary.
Maria would later conclude that Danny could have been twisted with jealous rage over thoughts that Selena was dating a friend. Whatever the cause, it's a rage that this time Willie will be powerless to stop without resorting to desperate measures. It's May 5th, 2007 in Salinas, California, when 62-year-old Willie Suber arrives at his daughter's home to pick up his young grandson. Selena's frantic calls to her parents tip Willie off that his daughter might once again be locking horns with her estranged boyfriend, Danny.
When he got there and saw his daughter come running out with the baby in one arm and the car seat in the other arm, she's crying and the baby was crying. That's really what put them over the top. They were surprised when it turned out Danny was there, and Willie Suber asked his daughter, is he in there? She wouldn't give him an answer. She said, just go, Dad, just go. He said, well, I'm going to go see what's going on.
Willie got out of the truck and went inside the house to talk to Danny, as he had so many times before.
And Willie could calm Danny down before, but this time, something's very wrong. Danny becomes confrontational in ways he's never been before with Willie. It frightens the father, who quickly retreats.
At that point, the victim had a baseball bat, followed Willie out of the apartment with the baseball bat, and became a confrontation.
I was just getting out of the truck, and Danny had a baseball bat, and he was screaming that he was going to bash my husband's head in.
And Willie's first statement to the police was, Danny and I had this confrontation inside the apartment. He chest bumped me. That's different from what Danny has ever done before. I turned around. I started towards the truck, and he came out behind me. I hear this yelling and screaming. I turn around again, and he's coming out with a baseball bat.
Selena was screaming and trying to hold Danny back.
The idea of just going away was something that he was not going to entertain because he felt that she was truly being threatened. And the choice Willie made was to go back to the car and get the gun and attempt to confront Danny, thinking in his mind, as he told me, that he could intimidate Danny to put the bat down.
Willie attempts to do so by pointing the gun down, giving Danny a chance to go away. Then warning shots are fired into the air.
He describes holding it in a position where Danny could see that he had a gun.
According to forensic evidence, Danny lunges at Willie, and then Willie fires twice. A bullet ricochets off the bat and hits Selena in the chest, and then Danny goes down.
The forensic evidence also shows that Danny was within 18 inches to 3 feet away when the fatal shot was fired.
Next thing I know, Danny's on the ground. My daughter's shot, and she runs over to Danny. Then I see Willie. And he is, I've never seen his face like that before. He was like, what happened? And he called the police, and he told them that he had shot someone, and that he shot his daughter, my little granddaughter, 9 years old, witnessed the whole thing. And she was hysterical.
He accepted responsibility for what he had done, and in the trauma of the whole thing, he stayed there, made the calls more than once, desperate calls for help to 911 to get help for his daughter, to try to get some help for Danny if Danny could possibly be helped.
Danny is killed by a bullet to the head. Selena has suffered a flesh wound but fully recovers. And Willie is charged with second-degree murder. Complicating his case is the fact that the gun is not licensed. For the defense, it's a clear instance of self-defense. But the prosecution says Willie Suber could have gotten away.
He could have gotten in his truck and left. But how can any father turn his back on this situation and get in his car and leave and go on about his business like nothing? I don't think any father could do that, or any mother for that matter.
In the fall of 2007 in Monterey, California, Willie Suber stands trial for the murder of his daughter's estranged boyfriend, Danny Flores. The trial hears arguments that Willie acted in self-defense. Witnesses say Danny was coming at him with a bat, threatening to kill him. As a father, Willie had seconds to choose to stay and defend his daughter and family or flee, leaving his daughter to defend herself. For Willie Suber, there was only one choice.
His focus was on wanting to protect his daughter. I was usually able to talk him out of it, to calm him down. I couldn't do it this time. So he was at a situation where here's this man with a baseball bat, here's his daughter trying to protect this man, and the daughter is saying, take my child because I'm afraid of what's going to happen.
The trial lasts 2 weeks. Selena at first declares her love for her dad and sides with him. Then, much to the confusion and anguish of her parents, she testifies for the prosecution, helping them question how reasonable Willie's actions really were.
We took the position that it was actual perfect self-defense from the beginning. We decided it would be best to submit the question to Judge Duncan for him to decide whether it was actual self-defense or complete self-defense, or whether it was an imperfect self-defense. Under the same or similar circumstances, any reasonable individual would have acted the same way that Willie Suber acted.
But the case is not without challenges.
The prosecutor was trying to paint Willie as an overbearing, controlling, and that Willie went in there with just guns blazing.
I think one thing that this case drives home is that we Americans are doing ourselves incredible damage with our belief in the Second Amendment right to carry firearms, that sort of thing. I think it's awful. I think it's just awful, and that's one of the most difficult things that we had to deal with in this case, is that Mr. Suber was carrying the firearm in an improper manner, in the sense that it was concealed and he didn't have a license for it.
In December 2007, Willie Suber was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years, with parole not likely before 8.
He was distraught. He was crying. He stayed on the scene even though another witness suggested he leave. The judge accepted the first part of the self-defense theory, that Willie honestly believed that he needed to defend himself and his daughter and his wife. The judge rejected the second part. The judge felt that the reasonable person would have found some alternative other than to use the deadly force that Willie used.
As soon as the judge made that final statement and said that Willie was going to be incarcerated for 10 years is what we heard, it was a shock. He's 63 years old. 10 years, could very well be a lifetime sentence. I hope that they find a position for him where he's going to be giving back as much as he's been giving for the last 40 years at this school.
Something happens, and it can happen to any one of us, where we're faced with a situation where we feel that the only way to resolve it is the untenable, the unthinkable. And that's what happened with Willie. It's a waste of a prison bed, in my opinion.